Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach TaskBox Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, special educators, and welcome back to another episode of Teach TaskBox Inspire. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday, and today we're diving into a topic that can be a little intimidating for special education teachers, especially if you're new to the field: parent-teacher conferences. So if you're listening to this episode sometime in December, like I am right now, recording right before we have parent-teacher conferences this week, these meetings can feel like high-stake conversations, but with a little prep and the right mindset, they can really be incredibly productive and positive. So let's talk about 5 things you definitely don't want to do during parent-teacher conferences, and what you should do instead to make the most of this time. All right, number 1, starting with the negatives. Let's face it, no parent wants to walk into a meeting and immediately hear everything their child is doing wrong. That's why I recommend that classic, sandwich feedback, right? So start with something positive about the student. And I know sometimes it's really hard, but just pick one positive, then discuss an area of need, and then finish on that positive. If you're struggling to find something good to say, remember, it doesn't always have to be academic. Maybe the student is a really kind friend at lunch. Maybe they are super funny and tell jokes all the time. Maybe they're super persistent when tackling challenging tasks. So highlighting their strengths first can really set a collaborative and supportive tone for the rest of the conversation. All right. Number 2, don't overwhelm parents with documents. So picture this. You hand a parent a thick packet of notes and data that you collected about their child. Their eyes are glazing over. They're super overwhelmed before the conversation even begins. Instead of bombarding them with paperwork, try simplifying your approach. So one idea I love using is just coming up with a sheet and think of things that has, you just 3 things. Something that you love about the student and something that you want them to grow, right? So just jot down 3 bullet points for each with specific examples. So maybe for the thing that you love the best is they're a really good sharer. They love playing a dramatic play with this certain friend, and then they really like to talk about their weekend. And then for growing is you really want to work on their independent skills when coming in from the bus. You want to work on their math, whatever the goal is and whatever. So this keeps the information kind of digestible and ensures that you're addressing what really matters most. You want the parents to kind of walk away and say, okay, what do I need to work on with Johnny? You don't want them to walk away and say, what did I just hear about? Number 3. Don't use teacher jargon. I know as educators, we sometimes forget how much specialized language we use. Acronyms like FBA or least restrictive environment might be second nature to us, but they can leave parents feeling confused or even excluded. And sometimes parents will not say, hey, what was that acronym you just used? Or I don't understand what you're saying. They'll just shake their head. So take a moment to kind of break things down. For example, instead of saying your child needs an FBA, you might say, we're really recommending a functional behavioral assessment. And this means we'll observe your child to figure out what triggers certain behaviors and what happens afterwards so we can develop strategies to help them succeed. This sounds a lot better than your child needs an FBA. So by explaining those things in clear, simple terms, you're making parents feel more comfortable and involved. And that's critical, especially for families who might not be familiar with the education system or who might speak a different language. Number 4, don't wing it. Parent-teacher conferences aren't the time to just kind of wing it. This might be your one opportunity to have an uninterrupted, focused discussion with a child's family. So preparation is key. One tip, send home a questionnaire ahead of time. Ask parents what concerns they have, what questions they want answered. Ask them, what do they want to talk about? Or maybe ask them what they think their child's strengths and challenges are. This kind of gives you time to gather relevant information and resources, kind of making the conversation more productive and personalized, especially if you're going to be short on time. Number 5, don't make assumptions. Never make assumptions about parents. It's easy to fall into an us versus them mindset. But the truth is, you're all on the same team. And if you've listened to me this far, you know that I have a special needs child. And so I'm often sitting on both sides of the table with this. So there is no us and them. I am both mindsets, right? So parents know their children in ways you never could, and their insights are invaluable. We're all on the same team. I want you to approach conferences as a chance to build a partnership. Listen to what they have to share. Ask them thoughtful questions and work together to develop strategies that kind of benefit the student. Something as a parent that I like to hear about during parent-teacher conferences is a little glimpse on what my child is doing throughout the day. Whether it's a story that they're telling me that, sometimes they're like, okay, Jacob was sitting at the table today and a student wanted to play with him. So they came over and he didn't want to play. Going on about a short story about my son really kind of gives me that insight on what his day looks like, especially if you have students who don't have a means to communicate. And for my son, he has limited communication skills. And so often I don't know what he's doing at school. And so having these conversations, no matter how short they are, really gives me an understanding of what his school day looks like and the person that he is showing the teachers at school. Now, maybe you don't have a self-contained setting. Maybe you are an inclusion teacher. And like me this year, I have parent-teacher conferences coming up on Thursday in a few days, and I have to share that time with other professionals. So not only does the gen ed teacher need to talk, but I need to share, and also the related service providers need to share as well. And so sometimes you only have 10 or 15 minutes. So really preparing and sitting down with these other professionals will give you an idea of very specific things that you might want to share or that you might want to ask with a parent. So going back to that questionnaire that you want to send home ahead of time will help your team kind of prepare so that you have the ability to speak super fast, especially if you only have 10 minutes like I do coming up. So that's all I really wanted to tell you guys about parent-teacher conferences. I know some people who are like, okay, this is my very first one. Believe me, parents on the other side are a lot more nervous than you are giving this conference, right? All we're thinking, and I say we as in parents, so I'm speaking as a parent here, all I'm wondering is how my child is doing, what I can work on at home with my son, and how I can improve our communication. So there's been years in the past where I haven't had great interactions or great communication with the teachers that he's had, and it can be difficult. So during these parent-teacher conferences, I will say and express how important it is to have daily communication or weekly communication so that we're not all trying to fit in our communication within that 10 minutes of time during parent-teacher conferences that might only happen once or twice a year. So there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Until next time, bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, TaskBox, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, task boxing, and inspiring.